We should get you on camera.
Well,
camera?
I've been on quite a bit
Yeah,
already.
that's
They
great.
know who I am.
That's good.
Just want to be the only one.
Greetings and welcome to Lansing Online News Radio. This is Bonnie Buckaroo. You're listening to LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I am joined by my co-host, Bill Castanier. Greetings, Bill.
Good evening.
Now, I know you had a couple announcements tonight about upcoming events. Isn't there a book? Were we a little too early?
Well, a little too early, but I think people should plan because they have to get a ticket for it.
Aha.
It's Corey Doctorow.
Yes.
Not any relationship
To Ebel.
Yeah, Doctorow. He's from Canada originally, but he writes young adult and he writes novels and they're science fiction. He's probably one of the biggest thinkers in areas of the internet. Everything from, and also about copyright law and how it applies to digital rights. He's radical.
Well, not my life.
But but by the business he's in, the publishing industry, he's radical. I'm surprised they don't have a bounty.
A hit out on him?
Yeah.
I know.
He posts everything on Creative Commons first.
Right.
For free.
And that's what a lot of people like Seth Godin and some of the other, Chris Anderson and others have done. The idea is that you post a downloadable PDF so that Seth Godin calls it idea virus, so that the people who really can spread the flu get it first, and then they can start an epidemic elsewhere. It's surprising how many people will still buy the book.
Oh, absolutely. You know what Corey does too is he asks people if they like his book to buy a book for a library.
Oh, that's
and
nice
he prearranges that online. Libraries have asked for it, so they get a hard copy then that they can lend out.
So he makes it easy to do.
He does.
Oh,
and he spent an entire year trying to find alternative ways in the publishing industry to make money that weren't traditional. And he finally came up, he put out a book all on his own, did everything, from start to finish, which he found was incredibly difficult. But what he found that made the most money for him was limited editions.
Oh, really?
In print.
In print.
Yeah.
So he still prints a few copies. Does it print on demand, but then sets it up with something special?
Something
cover?
special, or it'll have a special article in it.
I see.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh. Everybody's trying to find the right model.
And I think in publishing it's difficult.
Yeah.
But I think that one, he's going to have a crossover because he's going to have young boys. They're going to be probably 13, 12 with their parents. And then he says the older guys with eunuchs beards.
Eunuchs beards, eh? Yeah. Okay, so that's his crowd?
Yeah, it is. He's a digital outlaw.
Pirate Party's gaining authority in some places. The idea that we do need to reform our copyright laws. I'm hoping I'd like to see the Pirate Party. I was a Green Party person. Maybe I'll switch over to Pirate Party for a while.
Ruin somebody else's campaign.
Somebody else's campaign. Oh, yeah. Many people still hold me accountable for it.
Your name is
engraved. In certain circles, yes, indeed. But the Pirate Party wouldn't be a bad idea. Because our copyright laws really are stifling creativity. If Shakespeare were alive today, he wouldn't be allowed to write his plays because he borrowed the basic plot outlines from Herodotus and other writers who, nowadays, it doesn't look like anything's going to go out of copyright. The Mickey Mouse law that Sonny Bono put in is simply going to be extended every time to the point where you just can't take anything from the past and reconfigure it.
And that's one of Doctorow's points is that the copyright law is basically run by the big conglomerates for their own protection.
Right, they couch it in terms that the poor little starving artist or his estate is going to get this continuing money, but in reality, almost all artists nowadays are forced to sell off their rights to a large corporation. I remember in the music business that, when you looked at what artists had to pay to buy back their own rights, otherwise they would hear their songs on ads they might not approve of. It cost them a fortune, but the corporations control most of them now. Very difficult times.
Well, speaking of copyright, did you see that the Pure Michigan deal they did? What do they call those? The sing-alongs?
Yeah, the looked up?
They pulled it.
What?
They used copyrighted music. They rewrote a copyrighted song.
Oh, did they really? Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, so I thought.
Oh, that's
Ooh,
funny.
bad move.
Oh.
When I was listening to it, I thought, they're adding their own lyrics. Oh, they don't like that.
I wondered about that when I went to the Capitol the other day and they had the flash mob because they have taken the Maybe song and added their own lyrics and re-recorded it. I'll probably have my little video pulled the minute
You might.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that bothers me whenever they do things at the Capitol, because even if you have music playing in the background that you don't want, if it's copyrighted music, they can pull it. But that's part of what's wrong. What they're doing now is if you're a mom and, you're doing your little 2-year-old's birthday party and somebody starts singing happy birthday to the 2-year-old, they'll pull it because Warner's owns happy birthday. And it's illegal to use it, and that's kind of a good example of what's wrong with copyright.
I think you should come see Cory Doctorow. You'd enjoy him because
I will.
you two are definitely on the same plane.
Yeah, and apparently everybody tells him how radical he is. I think it should be mainstream, but I think that's just because the word hasn't gotten out to people. They don't realize how bad it is.
He also is a big deal about who controls your computer, and all the computers we drive in, that we live in, that we talk into.
Finding out today that here and in France, Facebook has now been taking your personal messages that you've been writing to people and putting them in your newsfeed if you have yourself listed as public.
It could be embarrassing.
It could be. So I will no longer be, and welcome to our 2 guests, who I will no longer be emailing through Facebook. Tonight we are joined by Ray Holman of the UAW and Emily Devendorf of Michigan Pride, and we're going to be talking about all the issues related to this upcoming election. And I just thought, did I write anything scandalous to you when I was?
No.
Oh, good. I always treat.
But I wish you would have.
I always treat Facebook anyhow, the Facebook side of it, as something that if I wouldn't put it on a postcard, that might land on somebody's desk and I won't post it on Facebook. And trust me, I get into enough trouble with things I would put on a postcard, so I don't, that's dangerous to begin with. But I never, ever thought that they could confuse your private messaging and put it into your newsfeed. That could be a disaster.
Yes.
I think I've just accepted that I'm bad enough at modern technology and the things like Facebook that I should not be trusted to know the difference.
Right. I don't want to know the difference
I
either.
don't want to know the
All the
difference.
stuff I say, no, I don't want to know.
Oh. Well, so we can get started with something scandalous. What are your major predictions for this fall's election? Ray, what do you think is going to happen, both at the national and the state level?
Well, obviously I represent state employees, 17,000 state employees at the UAW Local 6,000. So we're really focused on the state house.
Okay.
And right now there is 64 Republicans and 43 Democrats, maybe an off one, or maybe 44 Democrats. But anyway, so we're looking at the state house. So for the Democrats to take control, they need to flip back about 10 seats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be huge because, as you know, right now, one party controls all levels of government in Michigan. Governor Snyder's a Republican, the Attorney General, the Senate, etc., on down the line to Secretary of State. And we have really been suffering because of that. So we're really concentrating on the House of Representatives and trying to win back 10 seats. And the latest poll says that the voters would like to have Democrats back in power. So
how many seats are up for grab, and what did redistricting do?
Well, they did redistrict this year, and it's going to make it a little more difficult. But there's about 13 seats in play. Ironically or interestingly, a lot of them are in lower northern Michigan. House District 101, the Manistee area, and House District 103. Also up in the UP, there's some seats in play. But there's about 13 seats we think that are in play, but we need to win 10. One seat we're really looking at carefully. Yeah, it is a lot. And one seat, of course, we're looking at really carefully is House District 76. And that's where Roy Schmidt switched parties and made a deal with our current Speaker of the House. And we think that seat's, going to come back, or stay, I should say, I guess, whatever, Democrat. So that's really important.
And that, of course, is a write-in candidate. That's Winnie Brinks. And so that's a pretty significant race that she was able to get onto the ballot pretty easily, and for the most part, just through educating voters as to how to write in a candidate. That it was so clearly a dirty, ugly race on that side of the state after Roy Schmidt's incredible mistake, that she just needed to say this is the ethical way to just be a candidate, and she was thrown right onto the ballot. So
Lisa Murkowski was able to do it up in Alaska, much to my surprise. I don't think anybody at the national level have been able to do it for years or decades. So there is some hope, I guess, that this will work, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I am here wearing 2 hats, one for the Equality Michigan Pride PAC and as policy director for Equality Michigan. So for the Pride PAC, that recent poll that just came out, and that was from the Glenn Gareth group out of Chicago, it did show that voters do seem to want Democrats to take back the House. So that would be great in terms of the answers we're seeing on our questionnaires for the Pride Pack. Certainly, we have encountered an onslaught since 2010 election and the Tea Party influence in the House. There's definitely a extreme conservative slant. There are a lot of really great conservatives on our issues right now, surprisingly. But the extremism is pretty incredible. So we do need to bring back some amount of moderation at the very least. My concern is that we still need people to vote. And we are in this situation right now because in 2010, it wasn't that the public was not on our side. It was that they didn't come out to vote. So yet again, the public is on our side as they were then. And we're asking them to come out and vote, and they're not as excited as they were 4 years ago. Hopefully the presidential election will have them a little bit more excited than 2010, but we need them energized, and that's an issue.
I took a barometer. I had 264 students, mostly freshmen in one class. And the level of excitement this year compared to 4 years ago, it's non-existent. I mean, most of my students tell me that they're pretty sure that at least half of their student friends will not be voting because they don't know who to vote for. They feel so demoralized. They don't care. They don't like the advertising. They're just turned off to the whole process. Whereas 4 years ago, there was this incredible level of idealism driving so many young people, and it's gone.
Yeah.
It's just, they feel very frustrated.
So maybe we need to accept that and not count on the youth vote this time. And that's not to say we should ever give up on the youth vote, but the vote is there for progressive politics and candidates, with women, with seniors. It's there. We just need to actually get them to the polls.
But I keep looking at all these results where women are ahead, by 30 points, and Hispanics are ahead, and all. So it's just old white guys apparently, and apparently they're really energized, and they've got those Tea Party hats on and the tri-corners, and they're going to show up no matter what. Is that what the problem is? I mean,
they were definitely energized in 2010, and I feel like I'm more on a 2-year cycle because I work with the state legislature, and everything goes in 2 years with the House, and so it seems like it's a little bit better atmosphere than it was in 2010. But you're right, I don't think it's anything like it was back in 2008. But when you drill down on these races, though, even though this poll is saying voters may lean towards the Democrats, you're still talking about individual races and individual districts where they've been redrawn. So it's still going to be an uphill battle to get those 10 seats. That's
What about the ballot issues? Are they going to help or hinder?
I think
gut feel about that.
Certainly the presidential is going to help the ballot initiatives, and I know that that's the hope. And that's why this is a great year for that. I am also hopeful that it will work the other way around as well.
Yeah, there's 6 ballot proposals, and somewhat confusing unless you really study this stuff closely. Yes. In fact, I am paid to study this stuff and get confused myself. For one of the interesting,
we're going to be calling you, Ray, because we're trying to get through these.
One of the interesting things is, from my perspective, I don't believe in the emergency manager law. I'd like to see that repealed, but that's actually a no vote. But it's a yes vote for protect our families, for our bargaining rights. So it's a little confusing. But it's going to be real interesting. If Barack Obama continues to maintain, hopefully, this 10-point lead, I think it's going to help too. I mean, in the top of the ticket, it's going to help.
Yeah, a lot of education needs to be done. And yet again, the ballot initiatives we're seeing as a result of these issues being ignored by the current legislature, which means the same voters we need to be excited about coming out and re-electing the president, the same voters that need to say we need a different house, are the ones that would be interested in these issues. So it's the same base to energize.
You're listening to WLNZ LCC Radio 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. One of the things that always confuses me about these ballot initiatives is it seems some are put there intentionally to try to gin up a certain base, energize a certain base to come out. I mean, clearly the same-sex marriage law, Proposition 8 out in California, was done specifically to energize the vote. I think the ballot proposals this year are sincere. They're not designed to try to energize one base or another. But the one related to collective bargaining seems to me to be the biggest toss-up that I know, because I think there's probably strong feelings on both sides. What is the polling showing on that proposal?
Well, that's polling ahead right now.
Okay.
So I believe it's 48% support and maybe 39% against. But you want to have a bigger cushion at this stage of the game. You want to be up at least 10 points. So, because there's going to be a lot of outside TV money coming into the state here in the last few weeks. So that's a little concerning. And I should also say, I'm not the spokesperson for the Protect Our Families campaign. It's a big coalition of a lot of different progressive groups and unions. But I can tell you it's going to be, our life's going to change one way or the other on November 6th. And that's what I've been telling our members is I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can guarantee you this: one way or another, your life is going to change because there's just so many important issues that we're facing in November.
I'm stunned at how much labor has taken a hit, and I'm thinking that this is really a critical vote. I almost kind of wish that it weren't on the ballot at all because I'm always afraid with last-minute advertising that comes in. One of the challenges I was talking about with somebody today, even though I teach journalism and so I'm supposed to be in favor of the media making as much money as possible, I think part of what's causing so much difficulty with reform is the fact that local television, which has been struggling, this is a windfall for them. So we're not seeing in some ways the kinds of alternatives that I would really like to see. Third-party candidacies really are doomed because they're never included in any debates. And part of it is that, news organizations are really protecting that bottom line. This two-party duopoly has been very lucrative for them. This year we're going to see already $1 billion has been raised by the two major campaigns, the presidential campaigns. We're going to see maybe $3 billion in that race plus $5 billion for all the down-ballot races. That much money and the bulk of it goes to the media. That's just an enormous windfall. So I'm kind of concerned that there are a lot of the discussion that should be had about these issues. As you say, it's very difficult to even get through some of the ballot issues and figure out which way you're supposed to vote for the outcome you want.
Yeah, it really is. And it would be even worse if the presidential race was closer in Michigan. Can you imagine if it was a 2 or 3 point spread of attention we'd be getting? So, yeah. But you're right.
It's hard enough just to get voters to want to educate themselves on the platforms of the candidates who are actually in the race. So this means, yet again, we need to bring the issue to the voters, and we need to do that education. We need to take it upon ourselves to do that education and make it clear.
So does that get out the vote this time? Does it work mostly online now?
We certainly learned the power of social media 4 years ago during the first Obama campaign, and that was when we really saw the power of Facebook, the power of Twitter. They were almost, it was an experiment, a grand experiment. That is definitely still a powerful source of campaigning and mobilizing, but we're still using old-fashioned direct mail and doors. I still think it's a powerful thing for voters to have candidates at their doors.
I had one candidate come to my door this year. That was it.
Did it make an impact on you?
I voted for him and put a sign up in my yard.
Yeah.
Well, now, between social media, though, and sort of the old traditional media, there is the new ability to do the kind of targeting that we haven't been able to do before. Mm-hmm. I had a student, I have a student in my class. She's a young African-American woman from Detroit, and she was given one of the iPads 4 years ago, and she was out in her neighborhood where you could pull up videos and you'd know who was behind the door you were going to and which videos would be most likely to sway them. I mean, that's a level of micro-targeting that we haven't had before. What kind of scared me this time, though, was she said that her pastor had told them that maybe they shouldn't vote at all because he didn't want them voting for Romney, but he also didn't want them voting for Obama because of the LGBT same-sex marriage issue. Mm-hmm. So is that going to cut in some communities differently than it might have 4 years ago?
Actually, there was polling done immediately after he made his announcement, actually by Glenn Garrett Group, the group that just did the polling on whether the House could be flipped in favor of the Democrats. And the Glenn Garrett Group found that it pretty much had no impact on public support for Obama. What it did was it rallied the support of the base. Republicans who already tended to be against it put themselves a little bit further in that corner, but they were already unlikely to be swayed. And moderates, already about same-sex marriage, about equality issues, social issues in general, tend to say, why are we wasting our time on this? And if you talk to an independent and a moderate about equality issues, it tends to be more of a, well, I know so-and-so, or if it was my child, I would have to think about that. So polling actually showed that if it was an equality issue, moderates would be more likely to consider the candidate. It wouldn't deter them. It would rally the base, which might be more likely to get them out to vote. And I definitely feel that momentum in the community after that happened, and it wouldn't really affect Republicans.
Well, the other thing I know that kind of worries me is that the fundamentalist churches are very good at issuing voter guides. And the voter guides, they're not supposed to tell you which candidate to vote for, but the way in which they're couched makes it pretty easy for the people who receive them and know which way they're intended to vote. Do we have community groups with that power? Are we getting voter guides into their hands? Are you producing a voter guide looking at all of the issues, including the ballot issues? Is UAW and...
Yeah, what we do is we call it member to member or worker to worker. And, it's one state employee talking to another state employee is real powerful.
Yeah.
You have credibility. And so one of the things that I've been working on is we have been traveling the state and talking with different state employees in different departments throughout Michigan and talking to them, and we have meetings at a restaurant and then we'll bring in candidates and it's member to member and we're allowed to do that and spend union dues to do a member to member type of event. And that seems to be real powerful for us to use our own network. And that's traditionally, the strength of the union. And the way the UAW is broken up is into regions. So in the Lansing area, this is Region 1C. And so the director in Region 1C will have a list of endorsed candidates, and we'll get that out to everybody that we can. One thing that's unique about our the Local 6000, we're actually in the entire state of Michigan, so we have to keep track of everybody.
Wow.
But it also gives us a unique power because we have constituents in all the districts, so we can use that to our advantage.
If I go to your homepage, will I find a PDF that lists your endorsed candidates so that I can download that?
You won't find that right now, and we're working on putting that in it. And you probably would have to have a member password to get into that. But if you just go to our regular web page, you wouldn't see that. But we're working on that right now.
Well, you should share that widely because I think a lot of people would rely on your point
of
view.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Do you do the same thing?
We do. The Equality Michigan Pride PAC works with our C4 branch to endorse candidates and screen candidates, and we are a statewide political action committee. So we endorse on every level. So we have endorsed, and we have actually focused on the Supreme Court and on the judicial system this time, just because we really see that as where a lot of our battles are being fought right now. But also in federal races and the state house and also county and municipal races. So we really have endorsed at every level. We have that available on the Equality Michigan Pride PAC website. We also make that available through other voter guides. So Between the Lines, the state's gay rights newspaper, also Pride Source Online lists our endorsements, and also a number of the progressive organizations. I would always encourage any voter to, if they have an issue that they're interested in, to find out which organizations represent that issue and to look to see if there is a voter guide, because I know other progressive issues such as the environment, the League of Conservation Voters has an incredible voters guide and Sierra Club. So we try to make our voter guide available to as many of our progressive partners as possible.
One of the hardest things when I ran for office in 2000 was that all the questionnaires that I got, and I realized if I had had like a real campaign with campaign people, I'd have somebody to help me fill these out. I'm spending every night filling it, and they will ask 30, 40 questions. I mean, they're very in-depth. They want to know exactly what you're going to do on every issue. So that's a big demand on the part of a lot of people.
Absolutely. It's very important information to me as well as a policy director, because I'm not just looking at these to see if they are candidates that are pro-equality and leaders that care about our issues, but I'm looking at them and I'm predicting where they're going to be when a vote comes up. And I'm also measuring, as I see issues that are starting to become more important to our community, whether they have taken the time to educate themselves on those issues. For example, this year I added to our candidate questionnaires issues about HIV criminalization and issues about LGBT youth homelessness. And these are things that we hadn't really considered in the past and weren't on there. And there had also been less of an emphasis on women's choice issues. And we made a decision this year that would be a deal breaker for the Equality Michigan Pride PAC in light of this attack on women and women. Vaginagate, as we're calling it. That coalition building is no longer, it's not just an option, it's a necessity, that we need to be going to bat for each other, And it can't just be contingent on whether we're going to be getting something out of that victory or not. It's my opinion that we always get something out of a victory when a vulnerable community is being attacked.
Well, I spent 5 hours on Saturday at the meeting in the basement of the Capital Area District Library for Michigan Now, voting on the endorsements for Michigan Now. And as anybody knows me at a 5-hour meeting on a Saturday, I mean, I have to really care about that issue or I wouldn't have been there. So there are a lot of people who are putting in a lot. I mean, that's what really, we were talking about that the other day. While social media is valuable, it's very easy to click on a like button. Yeah. But, getting out there when it's icy on a November Tuesday and actually getting to the polls if the roads are kind of skittish, that makes a big difference, and that takes a lot more effort. So that's...
Yeah, sure. I know, between those organizations, building those relationships is incredibly valuable. And you mentioned Michigan Now. When I was fighting to pass the anti-bullying legislation, those other organizations that would stand up in committee and offer those alternative viewpoints that were in support of the stronger anti-bullying bills I could not have asked for anything that was better towards the argument.
I was surprised the other day to see all the news about how suicides are now the leading cause of death beyond auto deaths. We're now losing more people to suicide, and the entire article without mentioning suicides among LGBT teens, which is really reaching epidemic proportions. And I thought that's part of what's changing those. A teenager going into a car is always a dangerous thing, but a teenager being bullied is a very dangerous thing as well. And we're not as quick to talk about that. We seem to be hiding from that issue still.
Emily, do you think that Michigan has got a chance to see a change in the Supreme Court?
I think we do, and we have some really wonderful candidates. And in fact, Bonnie, before I leave, I did bring my list of our candidates so far. I do think that we have a chance to see changes on the Supreme Court, and I think that we're not the only ones focused on judicial changes right now. I know that for us, especially in this challenging legislative environment, the challenging socio-political environment in Michigan, we hope that the House will be flipped, but we can't count on that. And even if it is, there tends to be always a challenge around the corner. And I really do find that we have very rational, caring, compassionate people who seek out the positions of our justices. And it's making sure that we recruit those people. We recruit those people, we support them, we make sure that is as important a candidacy as anything else that we look at. And right now we have 3 women that we just endorsed in hearing. Bridget Mary McCormick was one of them.
Ray has been taking Bridget around to various places. She really is a remarkable candidate. Yeah. For those of you who might want to do so, Lansing Online News, I put up 2 videos, one of them talking about issues, one of them introducing themselves. Bridget Mary McCormick, who is the law school professor from Ann Arbor, and then we have Connie Kelly from Oakland Court, and then we also District Court, and then we also have Sheila Johnson, who's from Family Court. And I can't think of it. What an incredible change there'd be on the court if we had those 3 women on.
Yeah, no kidding. On September 8th, I had the pleasure to introduce Bridget McCormick to the UAW Local 6000 Executive Board and our council membership. It was probably a group of about 200 or 300 state employees, and I was really impressed with her. And at the time, I did not know her sister was a famous TV star.
Right.
But
no, is she Mary McCormick? What, did they run out of names?
Yeah, I know. It is confusing.
Is she Mary Bridget?
Yeah. Well, she often introduced herself as Bridget Mary McCormick, and it was funny you mentioned that too, because my president said you're going to introduce Mary McCormick, and I was thinking Mary McCormick, her name is Bridget.
Right.
And I had to get back on the internet and look at her bio quick, and I said, no, it's Bridget McCormick.
Yeah, she's the only one of her siblings that is not a showbiz star.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
They all are?
Yeah, her brother is an actor as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So she didn't go legit.
She took the easy way out.
But in talking about her though, she was very well spoken, and her history is a real impressive history, and she did a lot of work to free people that had been wrongly convicted, and she's really done a lot for domestic violence, exactly. And she's really, to me, not that I know her that well, but she seems like she's a person of high character, integrity, just the type of person you would need on the court. And she'll tell you, I want your vote, but I'm not going to say I'm going to rule the way you want me to rule. I mean, that's not her job. Her job is to, go out there and be a judge. And I think she is the type of person that we need to have on our highest caller, and we've definitely endorsed her. So hopefully all three of those fine people get on the court.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. You know what absolutely amazed me about those three women, however, was how candid they were. There's a new sort of running for Supreme Court approach that I've never seen before. They were very candid about their views, their concerns about where they felt there were flaws in the prevailing pro-corporate judicial philosophy that they feel has really sort of taken the cart very, very far right, and that there's a need to pull it back. And it was impressive because usually court races are the ones where no one says anything, you never see them at any events, and you just sometimes end up guessing because, you know, that's one of the reasons you always see those Irish names. It's because all the Kavanaughs run for the Supreme Court or court positions because traditionally they've been the ones who have been the Democrats, so you knew that if you voted for that name, you might get the Democratic candidate. It's a challenge nowadays, though. I think I'm glad to see it changing because how are we supposed to know what a judicial candidate is really about?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I agree with you. You know, and the problem is, in my opinion, is the insurance companies have gotten so powerful and the big corporate special interests. And, you know, we need to have these discussions, and I'm glad to see them talking about these issues because things have run amok, that's for sure.
The power of the corporations really has just grown so enormously, and this is going to be the first Citizens United race. What kinds of money, even though I think we're now went from purple back to blue again to a degree where a lot of the Romney money has been pulled out of the state, are we still going to see a sort of fight to the finish in some of these places, last minute money coming in? What are you hearing from people you're talking to out there in the community?
I think because of Citizens United, we have to at least anticipate it. We have to at least expect it. And that's why we have to do everything better, because we have to acknowledge that progressive causes don't tend to have that money behind it. We have the grassroots energy. We are on the right side of history, and I would like to think that has all kinds of power.
Right.
But we have really truly been punished by Citizens United and the power that money does carry. So as much as we possibly can do to prepare for that and not discount that power. I don't think that we should be shy about also looking for that financial support. We shouldn't be naive about the fact that we might need it.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know what you're seeing in the state legislature, these bills that are being introduced that you know, suppress the vote and go after collective bargaining rights. And you know what, you're seeing the same type of legislation in other states. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, these high-powered lobbyists and attorneys in New York or Washington are coming together, and they're using the state legislatures around the country as the battlegrounds, and that's where you're seeing this stuff coming from. And so it is, you know, I think it's all connected to the big money, the centralization of power and stuff. And that's also why they're coming after unions in particular, because we're a group that will stand up, we can organize, we have some people power, and they want to take away our rights, they want to take away our power because, you know, we're a roadblock to that.
Getting rid of unions does two things. First of all, it depresses labor costs, and so everybody's wages go down, and we've already seen a loss of 10% of the middle class over the last decade or so. And really, just an incredible loss of manufacturing capacity here in the Midwest and good jobs. And at the same time, it reduces your ability to be a force for progressive change beyond just union issues. I mean, the unions have always been on the right side of a lot of progressive issues beyond what might be particular to your particular concerns. You've been very supportive of LGBT issues. I can't think of two groups that will be more impacted if this race goes the other way. And it's still a toss-up. Yeah. I mean, it's not in the bag by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. I mean, you could see a disaster scenario where Governor Romney would become the president, and you could have a national right to work, which would really be,
I think you would,
like a nightmare state for us. And you're right. We're at a crossroads. But it's forced us to come together with other groups, you know, we're working together. Actually, other unions, you know, for example, the Coalition of State Employee Unions, AFSCME and SEIU, we've been connected to the hip. Well, let me tell you, the last 2 years, we're like together on everything. Good. And so, and with our other friends in the progressive community. So, I mean, it's desperate times, but it's forced us to come together and to get tough, you know. But it's a challenge, and it's difficult, and it's scary.
Why do you think that our governor stayed out of the race? He just hasn't shown up.
You know, I have no idea, and I'd quit trying to predict what he's going to do and try to figure him out. Other than I think he's just a numbers guy, pure and simple. I mean, we've actually had some success with him during bargaining because we've pointed out some ways to save money. In the past, the states kind of said, "Oh, they're union people, blow them off," and he's like, "No, wait a minute, you can save some money here." And so in that sense, there's been some positives, but I have no idea. Although he does not seem to ever have any. He never finds the strength to veto any of what the Republicans pass. And he has a history of signing everything that lands on his desk.
Yeah, I think strength of leadership also means playing blocker. You know, I don't want to make any assumptions about him not getting involved that would give him credit that we don't necessarily know he deserves in that respect. I know there was a moment where I was being told that he really did think rationally about and his priorities were economic development and attracting the best and brightest, and then he banned domestic partner benefits for state employees days before Christmas. And I held off judgment until that moment. I was ready to believe that was his philosophy. He was somebody you could work with. That he was a numbers guy. Yeah. But that is not a numbers guy move.
And for the benefits for the state employees, that was really interesting too, because he actually went after collective bargaining rights too at that time. Because he tried to overturn our contract. We had benefits for domestic partners that we had negotiated with the previous governor, and the civil service had approved it, and he tried to, go around that or get the civil service to overturn that. And the legislature attempted to do it, and they failed. But in that particular instance, he actually was going after, collective bargaining rights as well. So
that was as for our organization, for Equality Michigan, our first opportunity to point out this isn't just our community. Yes, it's not a completely unselfish interest. We are a demographic within every single demographic. We are union employees. We are women. We are voters. We're a part of all of those movements and all of those issues that are getting attacked right now. But people would assume not. And those aren't the primary things that we focus on. And yet that was our opportunity to say, this is a steamroller just going down Main Street. And in order to get to whatever it is that they're trying to get to, they're willing to take out just about anything. If it looks progressive in the slightest way, if it takes care of the common man, we're not watching for it. We're willing to take that out. And collective bargaining was on that path, and we made sure to bring that up at every opportunity. That this is not just equality issues. This is collective bargaining. This is the Constitution. This is.
So many voters really don't vote policy. They vote on what they perceive as the character of the individual or their emotional appeal. But I think it's time to really state what the dystopia would be if we saw the wrong side get in. I was just making a brief list while you were talking, Ray. I mean, we would see potentially, in addition to a national right to work law, we would see child labor repeal. We would see Newt Gingrich was big on that. He wanted to see all those teenagers out there swabbing the toilets at their local school. I mean, we would see a minimum wage rollbacks. We would see safety rollbacks and healthcare rollbacks. And I look at, I was reading the other day that the polls about the teacher strike in Chicago showed that the families in Chicago dramatically supported the teachers.
That's right.
But boy, you'd listen to the national media and it was, oh, how could they be doing this in this era? It's so unpopular. Well, apparently the people closest to the issue supported the teachers. They were worried about what's happening to their schools with all the privatization. You said privatization is coming here too.
Yeah, that's a huge concern for us. And in fact, on Thursday, they're going to be taking bids to privatize all of healthcare and mental health work within the Department of Corrections. And we represent psychologists, nurses, etc., counselors in 32 prisons that provide healthcare for 43,000 inmates. And again, on Thursday, you can see all that work. It's 1,300 state jobs. And they're professionals. These are psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, counselors. See all that work privatized. And that's really scary because we know what the history is. Oftentimes, these companies come in and say they could do the work cheaper, and then it turns out it ends up costing the state a lot more, and the state's still responsible. So, when you're releasing this inmate back into the community with TB and they start infecting the rest of the community, because most inmates get out, okay, and you're not getting them appropriate health care.
90% get out.
And the state gets sued, the state's still responsible for that. And so there's a whole host of problems with this move towards privatization. And it's another way to bust the unions.
Yeah.
If we lose 700-800 members, that's really going to be devastating for us. I mean, and I think that's part of it as well. And what we're doing is not sitting back on our heels and just watching it. We've actually are going to be presenting a counter proposal to compete with these private companies.
Oh, really?
Yes, we have. We've hired a professor from U of M named Dr. Zolo, and we're going to be part of that process. Because actually, if you really interpret what we do and you look at things, we actually know we can do the job better.
Yeah.
Because think about it. You're talking about administering healthcare in a prison setting. It's not like providing healthcare at the ready care down the street, right? This is in a secure setting. And we believe we can do a better job than the private companies. And so we have been, told by Republican leadership that if we can show that we can do the work cheaper, that they're going to, give us an opportunity. So we're going to hold them to that. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens on Thursday. And this stuff has really got me worked up, Bonnie, because if this goes through, this will be the biggest chunk of privatization in state history. And so it's really scary. And a lot of our psychologists and nurses have left because, they don't know what's going to happen. They don't want to lose their collective bargaining rights. They want to be state employees. And a lot of these people are really good at what they're doing. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Crony capitalism at its worst.
That's right. That's right. And
that's the danger.
And it's not just going to be the Department of Corrections. It's going to be the Department of Human Services. Yeah. It's going to be, look at the Department of Transportation now. And, and that's a really scary thing.
To take profit out and make that a chunk of any contract is really going to mean that something has to give, and it usually means quality of service. So the prices still tend to be high, and yet at the same time you get less service.
That's right. And this is a little bit different than privatizing custodians, okay? Right. Because these are the employees that are highly educated, and they're not going to be able to attract a psychiatrist any better than we can attract a psychiatrist right now. The only way that they're going to be able to beat what we're doing now is by providing less care to the inmates.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, who cares? They're prisoners. We don't care. Well, you're going to care when they're released back in the community and they're sick, or when you're releasing the wrong people, because you're talking about the psychologist to make decisions about who gets paroled and who does not get paroled. So all this stuff is connected. And so this is a huge thing.
Is there a stronger statement that they can make that they don't believe it's the government's job to take care of people than to try to cut ties with everybody related to the government that takes care of people?
Emily, what would be the dystopian future if the election does not go our way in November? What would happen? We'd see a rollback potentially of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Oh, wow.
What would be the long? I think people need to know.
Michigan already, in relation to the rest of the country, is almost that that possible future. I know that I've gone to conferences in the South, and they feel bad for us. And that's not. I'm not even joking. It's true. And they do better.
Grim.
They do better with their public policy than we do here. They don't have somehow the extreme influence on policy making that we do. They have the influence. They have the religious influence in a stronger way, and yet somehow are able to make some rational decisions thinking about the people who are involved. And I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying the southern states do it fantastically.
But you may be onto something, because Mississippi rejected the ballot proposal, the personhood amendment. I hate to say it, but I'm not sure that would be the case in Michigan. Michigan might be one of those states that would pass it. We really have seen a sort of rise in the right radicalism in the state. We saw the rise of the Michigan militia many years ago. There is a sort of hotbed, and I think a lot of it has to do with the displacement of white middle-class male workers from the factories. I think they're very disgruntled as a result of those jobs disappearing, and they have that free-floating anger. And I think it's sort of like, as Obama coined the phrase the other day, shoot first and aim later. I think they're aiming at the wrong place, but
I think
we haven't been too successful in persuading them.
It's hard to look at a future of what would be less than this. Because I think we're feeling very good about the fact that we're on the cusp. I think we're interpreting the cusp as us having more than we have. Because in Michigan, really, we don't have adoption rights. It's still legal to be fired if you're gay or perceived to be gay. It's still legal to be fired for not fitting a gender identity that your employer wants you to fit. obviously there isn't marriage equality. We need a hate crimes law. We have to go to the federal level for a hate crimes law. So really, even on the federal level, you can only go back so far before there really isn't anything anymore, right? Don't ask, don't tell is a pretty small step. I mean, we remember way back in the day when we acknowledged that African Americans were already serving in the military, and wow, well, we perceive them to have value here. Maybe we should perceive them to have value in other realms as well. And we don't compare the movements, but I think there is a similarity in the kind of ignorance and the refusal to see the hypocrisies that exist right now and seem to persist.
Well, I want to thank Ray Holman of the UAW and Emily Dievendorf of Michigan Pride for coming this evening, and I want you to know that I really do want you back here the week after the election, because we will either be talking about how we can move forward because things are going to look good here in Michigan, and we have some good news to report, but we're going to be talking about what do we do next.
Yeah.
That's right, and also we're going to be dealing with the lame duck session too.
Regardless, yes, which is going to be another
so it'll be exciting.
That's absolutely what I was going to say. Yeah. If we come back with good news from the election, then we may come back with all kinds of concerns we might want to share about the rest of the year.
What's going to happen in those waning moments? Of, yes. Right. Well, I'm eager to say that I'm hoping we've carved out time and we'll have them on the week right after the election. This would be wonderful. Thank you so much for helping us understand what's really at stake. We really appreciate it.
Hi, now we're going to be joined by another Emily, Emily Ann Gaylor. And Emily is the promotional manager at Schuler's Okemos. And she has a T-shirt that says "Long Live the Indie," and for people that don't know what an indie is,
indie rock band, of course.
Yes, exactly.
You can't tell I'm a rocker.
I think I've seen a photo of you trying to play drums somewhere.
All right, yeah.
Those who want to see the shirt can go to Lansing Online News on the Ustream.tv, or they can go to our Lansing Online News website. We do live stream the show in addition to being here on WLNZ 89.7 LCC Radio here in Lansing, Michigan.
Cuddle up to the mic. Yeah, get close.
Yes.
One of the reason Emily's on, other than she's always an interesting person to talk to, is this is the 30th anniversary of Schuler Books, which in the book industry is forever.
And the way things have been going, it's
Borders barely made it 30.
Did they? Yeah. Did they make it to 30?
They did. I mean, they were in business maybe 8 years, but not as most people remember. They had a small store in the harbor. So, Emily, why do you think Schuler's been successful?
I think that one of the most important aspects of our bookstore is the staff, honestly. Because we have such a good relationship with the community and with the literature, and I don't work with anybody who's not an avid reader and passionate about literature and passionate about the community and what's going on in the community. And I think that gives us something that even, the Borders and Barnes & Noble don't have is, most of the people I've worked with for many years. I've been with the company 8 years. So it's just, I think that kind of
longevity. You started when you were 3.
Well, actually, the bookstore is 6 months older than me. So, yeah, which is, that's another thing. I've never lived in a world that didn't have bookstores like Schuler's and bookstores like Borders, and so. The threat of them going away is really scary to me because I've never been without them. So
move to Idaho, some places like that.
Well, aren't there major cities now? You were talking to me.
Birmingham,
Michigan
doesn't have a bookstore.
Seems, and that's
probably
such an affluent community.
One of the most richest communities in the state, and probably literate. They read, so they have to go somewhere else. Detroit area is definitely underrepresented in bookstores. There's no question about it. We're fortunate to have 2 Schulers.
I'm surprised. I mean, that's a lot.
We didn't have 2 Schulers. Think what? We'd have 1 Barnes & Noble.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And it would be a long haul for Okemos to go get a book.
Mm-hmm.
What, in your 8 years, how have you seen the stores change? What have you noticed the most?
The biggest, I think, is the music and DVDs. We were Schuler Books and Music, and that is still our official name, but really we refer to ourselves as Schuler Books now because, across the board, DVD and CD sales are with the development of Napster and file sharing and iTunes and things like that, you don't sell them anymore, So I think, especially seeing ebooks come along, and in my lifetime, I've seen record stores come and then go, and
I
so
remember Warehouse Records had
yeah.
little stores all over town, and they're
Mhm.
gone. And then we had the Tower Records in downtown East Lansing, and that disappeared. So, yeah.
Exactly, and so it's kind of scary. We're doing as much as we can to keep books relevant as a part of brick and mortar, as part of the community, because we don't want, it was how nice was it to go into a record shop and browse and actually like expose yourself to new music that's not in the top 10s on your iTunes when you pull it up. I think that experience is that's changed so much that to not be able to go into a bookstore and browse the shelf and see things that maybe you would normally see, especially on the internet, you're kind of directed to things you're already inclined to like. If you search something in Google ads come up that point you to something else. And so I think one of the biggest benefits is that the bookstore exposes you to a lot of ideas that you wouldn't necessarily seek out on your own.
The world is divided into browsers and searchers, and the internet is very good for people who are searchers. I have this one particular product I want. And so what that led over the years was that my buying history on Amazon was very different than my buying history in a bookstore. Mm-hmm. And so Amazon was always prompting me with only one kind of book, and it said, if you don't like the data mining we're doing and you want to broaden your profile, you can go in here and you can go through this little questionnaire and start selecting other books, and it'll change your profile. And it didn't change a thing. I still kept getting exactly so their data mining isn't as good as they said it was, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think of all the things I've learned just working in the bookstore, being surrounded by all of this literature, and all these amazing books and authors and booksellers who are extremely knowledgeable. And, I just benefited from it so greatly that even just if I didn't work there, having it in the community, I feel like would,
One of the things that I see, because I cover that for Lansing City Policy, is authors who come into town, and Schuler's makes a commitment and works hard to bring in authors. Mm-hmm. And we're exposed to a broad spectrum of ideas.
That would disappear.
Absolutely. For example, there's another bookstore in town that hardly ever has an author. And that's one of the charming things about bookstores.
Yes.
You can go in almost, couple, 3 times a week, sometimes more, mm-hmm. and see an author who either you know about or you might learn something about them by going to see them. And that's pretty special.
Mm-hmm. One of the other bigger changes I've seen is combining, and that started many decades ago, combining coffee and food with books and making it possible for people to sort of relax and have armchairs and places they could peruse the books, because it used to be that they didn't do that. They didn't want you sitting down for fear that you might read the book while you were there.
Yeah.
And that attitude changed. But now I'm also seeing a lot more in terms of diversity of products, gifts, used products, used books, and so forth. So there seems to be, it's a changing mix, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think we were one of the first that had a coffee shop. And now we've expanded to serving beer and wine in our downtown Grand Rapids location.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Just trying to draw in a different clientele, kind of like the after work, relaxing clientele that might enjoy the bookstore experience. But yeah, that's what we ideally want the bookstore to be, is a place for community members to come, relax, have a cup of coffee, browse their interests, find some exciting new items, and, really feel a sense of kind of almost a second home, like being able to feel like you can, sit on this armchair and browse through the first chapter of this book and see if you want it. And, so I think that when you get to know other community members, you get to know, I just can't, I can't say it enough. The bookstore is just such a, facilitator
have to
for
put
that.
in some sort of speed dating thing to get them all in there. I think that's now that you're going to have beer and wine, I think now if you add a little speed dating, and you could do it by your book profile.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's
very
actually
cool.
a great idea.
I remember someone I used to work with who was single, and she had a heck of a time meeting men. I said, go to a bookstore.
Yes.
It's
now if they're going to offer beer and wine,
obvious.
You can relax and chat.
They can read. That's a start.
That's a start. Yeah. Peer at each other over the the book that they're reading.
One of the most obvious things, and I've written about it, and Bonnie and I have talked about it on the show, how our tastes in reading have changed. It was 50 Shades. Mm-hmm. When you started 8 years ago, you would have never expected that to be at the front of the store.
Oh no! When I started, one of the first sections I shelved as a bookseller was erotica, and I mean, barely anybody touched it or, came around it.
Or they wore gloves when they did.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely wore gloves myself, no. But yeah, it was kind of like a taboo area almost, it was a little bit hidden in the bookstore, like in between a couple other sections. And I feel like, it's just kind of, 50 Shades of Grey, I can't believe how that has exploded because
amazing.
Yeah, it is just amazing. But now we're seeing, as with anything that explodes in the book industry, you see a trend of similar titles because when somebody reads something they like, they're voracious for something similar to that. Same thing with people being really loyal to authors. And but now, we're seeing the surge of all these. I call them romantica titles that have like a strong storyline, but also contain lots and lots of sex. So it's interesting to see those at the top of the bestseller list every week.
I haven't really seen any community backlash.
No,
none, and that's one of the things.
I think it's because the romance angle is so strong.
Yep.
Cheap that I am, I went and read the free chapter. They have free chapters, like 2 or 3 online. And really, they didn't get to any sex part by then. It was
takes forever. The lead up is so. But once they get to it,
it's there.
Holy cow!
Those you don't get for free, apparently.
Yeah.
I've been expecting a T-shirt that says "Holy cow" because that's her most common phrase.
I found double crap a few times when I was searching in the pages. But
is that the biggest seller? Though when we look at it, the sort of Twilight series was big, and then now we're seeing, vampires.
Hunger Games. Remember, I asked your students the other day.
Yeah, the Hunger Games came up in the middle there. But really, it's interesting. Actually, in my time in the bookstore, I've kind of seen that start happening. This like frenzy around a particular title. I think
did it start with Harry Potter and that generation grew up and they're reading Hunger Games now?
Yeah.
And then they're moving into erotica? Is that it?
Yep, exactly. I think that's exactly what happened. And even Harry Potter changed the book industry in so many ways. Just with the movie industry being more interested in what titles were coming out and kind of, we had a title last year that was optioned for a movie before it even came out. So yeah, it's interesting to see things like that happen, but yet also the explosion in young adult literature to begin with. Twilight would have never gotten off the ground if it hadn't been for Harry Potter, because people actually started paying attention to what authors were writing for a younger audience. I know growing up.
They learned how to read.
Yeah.
They did. They developed a reading habit. Those were long books.
Yeah.
Exceedingly long.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened with the Harry Potter series were parents were reading it with their children.
Oh, I don't think they're doing that with 20 Shades, but
I know.
either that or it's the Addams family that's doing it.
Yeah. What would you want to try to make any predictions? You're savvy enough to know where the industry may be going. What's gonna be going on there in the next few years?
It's really hard to say. I'm so deep in it that it's hard to see a future without paper physical books. But I do know the impact on publishers just from the sale of ebooks, the amount they're able to print, the amount of authors they're able to tour, and things like that. I think that's going to create, for lack of a better term, a trickle-down effect to the bookstores, even almost worse than the lack of patronage has been. Because without the publisher support, we really can't do the author events and things like that are what we love to provide for the community.
I keep wishing that there were a way that I could come and plug in my Kindle in your store and you get an override when I downloaded the book from your outlet, you see. But Bill was talking about the fact that as these kinds of specialty signed books are so much a part of the whole culture, if there was a way to do that electronically, where getting it by the Schuler book, imprint with a little nice cover on it, sign might be some way to add value. You gotta think of something.
Right.
And they're working hard. Emily, you've done a lot of major events at the store, but what are some of the highlights in your last 2 years?
Well, tying into what we were just talking about, Chris Van Allsburg's visit to the store was really special. But one of the things he spoke about was how hard it was to translate his book into an ebook version. Any of his books with the illustrations, the gorgeous full-page illustrations that, things like that, I think will always have value and will always be around, regardless of, where, the quality, paperbacks are, things like that. But, gosh, I would have to say, I have so many great experiences. Jennifer Granholm, that was amazing to meet her and be able to host her for a book signing. David
I'm
Sedaris.
just remembering the dating game video that I
Yeah, just listen. She's now all going to be remembered by that. Sedaris was pretty neat. I've seen him twice.
That was an amazing, and it was a long day. He spent so much time at the bookstore talking to every customer, and it was great to have him there. That was really fun.
You've done a great job with a lot of those special events. I've been to a few of them, and they're a lot of fun. And I think that's what, if we can turn this into sort of a community hub and bar and books, maybe with that's going to be the answer.
Exactly.
Then we can have all these couples that meet there.
Yes, I met my boyfriend there.
Oh, see, it worked for you.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Emily, and I will look forward to having everybody back next week. And this is Lansing Online News Radio, WLNZ, LCC Radio, 89.7 in Lansing, Michigan. Thank you very much. See you next Monday night. I think I went 3 seconds over. That's not bad. They let